Welcome to the Unite and Ignite webinar series. I'm here with Chua, who is a global public health expert and who has had an illustrious career working with executives and government organisations around the world. Chua will be joining us as a keynote speaker in Athens for the Unite and Ignite Orchestrating Exponential Innovation program, Bettering Lives Through Ethical Technology, later in 2025. Chua, welcome, and perhaps share with our audience the areas of expertise that you are in and your current focus.
Well, thank you, Christina. Thanks for the invitation to speak in Athens. So I've had nearly 40 years of career, and most of my time has been spent in healthcare. And I retired 6 years ago as the Director General of Health and the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Ministry of Health. And since then, my focus has been around trying to look and help colleagues around the world on what's the next version of the global health system.
It makes me smile when you say that you retire, because in the multiple conversations we've had, I don't actually feel retirement anywhere in there. So what are some of the common themes in the global health systems trying to work their way out of current predicaments?
For those who are paying attention to what's happening on health systems around the world, the common theme that you will observe coming out, Christina, is that they are all in trouble in different stages of crisis, and they have been for some time. And some of the common themes that they share when they're in that spaces, they are all busy trying to implement some form of a transformation, innovation, or reform program. And by and large, that they have been trying really hard, but none have so far succeeded to actually solve the problem.
It's interesting because you've called the program The Road to Recovery. So are you seeing aspects of recovery? I know you mentioned innovation. We've talked about technology and engagement also. How is the Road to Recovery program formulated, and why have you called it the Road to Recovery?
I've called it the Road to Recovery because no matter how bad the global health system is, it will recover. So so all the efforts to that is about what kind of journey that they will be on this road to recovery. And I'm particularly interested around what are the recurring themes of the various governments in terms of their reform program on this journey of recovery, and what are the things that they are doing right and what are the things that they are yet to do right.
I love the way you phrase that. So it's what they're doing right and then what they have yet to do right. I love the positive aspect of that. So what are they doing right?
I think that what they've done right is to, using a medical term, they have done the right diagnosis of what is the problem. And the second thing they're doing right, and the health system generally around the world is doing right, is also saying we understand what the problem is, so this is what we have to do to fix it. So in medical terms, the diagnosis is clear, the prescription to treat the problem is also clear. That's the right part.
So I think I know what's going to come next. Where is there room for improvement? What are they not quite doing right yet?
I think the next step for all global health systems who are kind of in the same spot is to move beyond the diagnosis and the prescription and to try and avoid this recurring theme of endlessly talking about the diagnosis and the prescription, and actually translate and implement those things that they know have to be done.
One of my favourite sayings is ideation without action is hallucination.
Yes.
And I think it fits quite well here. What do you think stops people with that implementation? Like where's that barrier? Why do we balk? We know things, the science is out there, the research has come back time and time again, yet often we'll balk and hesitate, stop, not progress at the point of action?
So there's a number of reasons why we haven't done it yet. I think one of the reasons is, when I said earlier, the prescription is clear. It's not universally clear across the entire system. For those who have spent a lot of time thinking about this whole thing, it's clear to some of them. But for many, the prescription remains unclear. So I think the first step that has to be overcome is to make the prescription universally clear to everybody in the ecosystem, not just a few people, who are leading the program. Because if we are going to bring about change, it's the whole ecosystem, it's all the people in the system that has to buy into the change and need to understand what the change is. So that's the first part around why it hasn't happened yet. The second part, perhaps it's even more challenging, is when people have come to the point where they understand the prescription and what needs to be done. I think the common mistake is thinking that those who are currently solving the problems of today necessarily have the skills and the knowledge, and the leadership talent to actually execute, what is quite a radical prescription. Right? So I think that second part is where I see is the biggest challenge.
I love the idea that you alluded to about having multiple stakeholders involved, because nothing happens unless we do have the multiple stakeholders involved, and that's everyone from the patient, say in the medical sense, to the admin, the CEO, the executives of all the health organisations. So what are those skill sets that are missing that we need for implementation?
So there's a few things that we need to look for when we kind of look at the package of skill sets. I think the starting one is about teamwork, because if you look at healthcare system generally, it's a very hierarchical type of organization. Now, teamwork in that sort of context, it's about a master-apprentice relationship where, someone who's a consultant will actually be telling everybody what to do. Everybody is part of the team as long as they follow instructions, right? However, I think in the teamwork we are talking about that needs to implement the new prescription is a collaborative, a shared learning, shared creation type of teamwork, as opposed to a heroic, autocratic, hierarchical leadership. And I think that's kind of the first kind of important ingredient in terms of going forward. The second one is all team members need to come from quite a diverse skill set and background. So they bring different perspective and lens of how they see the implementation of prescription. And there must be room to allow for the discourse and the dialogue, because I think that the problem that we face and the prescription that needs to be done to fix it is not about looking for the silver bullet or the best practice. It's about the co-creation and the trialing, the rapid trialing of new ideas, new ways of doing stuff. And that comes back to this another related point, which is the ability of team members to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, and to be able to be agile in the way they chop and change, how they're doing things, and how they might actually do a U-turn or go off in a different direction. So being agile, being comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with when things are not quite going right, the ability to actually stop and actually learn quickly and then come up with a new plan and execute.
There's so much in what you just said. Let's go back to leadership for a minute, because we throw the words teamwork, we throw the words collaboration, we know hierarchical very rarely succeeds. In fact, I've done a little bit of work in holacracy, and even that doesn't always succeed. So there's somewhere in the middle. What are the traits of the person that's leading a project, say? So we need the project leader, we need the person that's going to push the project along, we need the specialists in the various fields that are required for that project. What do you think of what is the leader, like if you can paint me a picture of the leader that is effective in making collaboration happen and in making teamwork happen, and that comes into something like egoless or almost egoless, in order to go, the project's not about me, the project is about all of us, and the project is all about us succeeding. How do you see that person, and have you met many of them?
I've met one. And I think that one of the key things that I learned from that particular individual is all those things I talked about, teamwork and, being agile, this sort of stuff. But also importantly, I think that the most senior person who's leading this initiative has to understand the context, the starting position, and has to understand be able to stand aside from all the day-to-day stuff on a regular basis, to be able to see where all the pieces are moving, how they're fitting, and whether or not it's heading in the right direction, or whether the environment and the context has changed again, right? And therefore, the person need to understand that to be able to actually create a solution in this sort of quite an ambiguous, constantly changing environment and challenge, they need to be comfortable with having team members who are smarter than them in different technical fields, right? It doesn't matter what it is, right? They need to be comfortable that he or she is working with individuals who are smarter than them in their areas of expertise, and the leader has to learn how to stand back and create the space for those people to do what they're good at, right? But the leader's job is to make sure that all the expertise join up. Often when you lead a high-performing dynamic team and you recruited some fantastic, smart people in your team, there will be tensions. There will be points of disagreement, different perspectives, sort of stuff. So the leader's role is much more like a conductor in an orchestra. You're not playing any instrument, but you've got the baton. And you are controlling the rhythm and the pace, of the initiative and the program, right? And all the experts understand where they fit. And the ability of the leader to intervene not with a sledgehammer, but almost like an acupuncture. Where you see the pain points and blockages, you're applying the necessary solution to unblock those barriers early, right? And also to make the hard decisions, because when you are working with a team of, high-performing, smart people, they are passionate about what their field is, right? And for you to say to them, we need to stop this or slow this thing down, it requires, quite a unique skill to be able to get them to agree and not to lose them in the process.
I think I love the analogy of the orchestra. And I was also thinking while you were talking, and allowing people to shine at different times during the performance. You've got the violin solo or the cello solo or the drum solo, whatever happens within that performance. But it's also being able to, and I liked what you said before about leading from behind, and that is very much getting your own ego out of the way of a project. I remember we ran a workshop with a group of leaders, and we asked everybody what their projects were that they were running, and everybody went through and suggested what their projects were. And the last person that we got to said, you know what, I don't actually want to be the leader. I want to be the one that's standing behind you all, making sure that everything gets done and that all the projects come to life. And I thought that's another skill set or a different person within that team, within that collaborative team that you were talking about earlier, that's required to help the leader progress. But the whole analogy of the orchestra is so appropriate in that.
So let's talk a little bit about leading from behind. I think that the challenge of leadership, particularly within the context of global health system crisis at the moment, is you need to create that team, you need to create the environment for the team to flourish. But as the most senior person, you need to know when to lead from the front, because there will be time where you have to be in front. And you need to understand when that is, right? But then that moment will pass, and then it's time to lead from the middle. And someone else will have to be in front. And that moment will also pass. And there will be a time when you have to lead from the back and stand back and watch them and watch the rest of the team perform, and do what they can. And I think that knowing when to exercise leading from the front, the middle, and the back is a very unique skill. If you look back into history about those people who have done amazing things, they don't always lead from the front, neither do they always lead from the middle or the back. They have done all three.
Do you have an example?
I'll talk about three different examples. I think the first example is leading from the front, right? So obviously, the time to lead from the front is when there is chaos and where, yes, you create a team, but the team is not functioning. So, you have to then stamp your mark. You have to actually outline to everyone what is your expectation, and so they're clear around what their account looks like. And that requires a certain amount of benevolent autocracy, right? So everybody knows you're telling them what to do, but you can't need to do it that doesn't actually take the limbs off, right? Because when the instructions given, you actually need to rely on them to do it. So there would be, my CEO who a long time ago, who basically pulled me up from middle management and put me into executive roles and stuff. And he showed me the meaning of leading from the front, right? He would never put any of his staff member and to do something that he wouldn't do himself. And often the most difficult bit at the beginning, you would see him doing it. And he would then turn around and pass it over to his colleague to say, now it's your turn. So he's standing from the front. And at some point, he will hand over the baton and move to the middle and watch whether the person is hand over, whether the person's doing it well, right? So I think that's kind of like an example of leader who's kind of do this sort of stuff well from the front. The person that I think who knows how to lead from the middle is probably one of the chairman of the board that I used to work with. He loves to orchestrate, right? And he understands that there are people around the table who's much more than him, right? So he leads from the middle by actually sitting alongside and working alongside people to do stuff together, right? And allowing them and helping them to actually do the roles well. But he's sharing the platform with them, right? And then the one who's kind of like leading from the back, right? I haven't found someone who's done that really well, because when you have come through the system leading from the front and you had the opportunity and be able to lead from the middle, it's a big challenge to be able to stand back now and lead from the back.
It is definitely a composite skill set. You also mentioned, when we were talking about skill sets, you mentioned the ability to to be agile, to be creative, to be imaginative, etc. How do we encourage people in potentially a fear-based field where nobody wants to make a mistake because someone's head needs to roll if a mistake's made? How do we encourage people to develop those skill sets? And not only how do we encourage them, but how then do they learn those skill sets? Are they things that are innate, or do you think they're teachable skills?
I think the different schools in thought about that, but I certainly subscribe to one particular school of thought. So my school of thought around those things is like skills and knowledge you can teach and acquire. But there are certain innate temperament that I think are inborn. So I think part of the challenge, I think, is when we are looking at appointing leaders or team members, this sort of stuff, we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on skills and knowledge, but we don't ever select people to say, I wonder what's their temperament. Because if you have, for example, if you're working in a sector where you need a lot of empathy, because things are just going to go wrong here, right? If you have somebody who actually innately doesn't know how to be empathetic, they can try to learn to be empathetic, it will always come out wrong. Right? So I think that's kind of like one of the big gaps when we kind of looking at developing and selecting leaders. I'm a strong believer to say we need to understand individuals' innate temperament, and then how do we help them to acquire skills and knowledge, and how do we help them sharpen those temperament? Because those innate temperaments are like rough diamonds. They don't become, excellent all by themselves, but the basic ingredients are there. So you need the support of your seniors, your organizations, your peers, this sort of stuff, to help you to polish off those rough edges. So if you are a good communicator, but you haven't got the skills or stuff, but you are a natural communicator, right? Well, if you put some support around those, that person will fly, right? So I think there's certain different people have different profiles. And I think when we kind of looking at how we want to solve difficult, complex problem, we need a team. And when we kind of look at a team, we need a team of people with different temperaments. Right? And then you need someone who understands it all, who can actually manage the team and manage the different temperaments around when and how you use them.
One of my favourite terms is, or to say particularly, and I'm on a mission to have what I call a helicopter visionary on all boards and all executives and everything, what you just said, to have that overview that can then join all the dots and pull the right people together and then see the chaos where it's happening and, all those unique leadership skills that you were talking about. If we pull it back into the health industry, which is your area of expertise, how important is empathy, do you think, in that field, given that we've all had friends, relatives, someone in hospital, sometimes, and I'm not just saying the health industry is hospital, but in this instance, hospital, because sometimes it appears that everybody's so task-focused that we forget the human behind the patient, behind the family, behind the person that's actually working there, behind the doctor that, that's trying to get everything done. How important is empathy in leadership, particularly in the health sector?
It's so important because the health sector is kind of like has this insatiable demand, more than what the system can ever deliver. And no matter how much money we put in, and no matter how innovative we are, and no matter how wonderful discoveries that come, all this sort of stuff, we will never meet the needs of every single individual around. Never. Right? And so when those needs are not met, the people in charge of system need to understand, and that there are consequences on real people, right? And I read a lot about when something goes wrong, and there will be these usual lines that come out to say we regret, we apologize, we understand, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of look at this sort of stuff and you ask yourself, well, what's changed? So I think being able to express and be sympathetic and empathetic when something doesn't go well, sort of stuff, is big in healthcare, but it is not about what you say. It's actually about what you do next. Right? Now, what you do next may not actually solve all the problems, but it signals that as a decision maker, as an important participant in the how system works, you have thought about the impact on people's lives, and you have made a genuine effort to try and change things. Right? You won't solve the problem, but people will recognize that.
I find the whole thing fascinating. I'm very much into first principle thinking, design science, etc. Do you think that we've got to this stage in a lot of the bureaucracy trying to fix the issues in the health industry, that perhaps it's time to just strip everything back and start from the beginning? Because what it feels like, as someone who's not in the health industry, and in a lot of different industries also, is that we patch, we fix, and it feels like this mountainous Band-Aid sometimes. Yeah. Whereas sometimes I think it needs to be stripped back. Do you think that's a fair observation or not?
I think that's a fair observation, I think, particularly for people who rely on the health system and are frustrated by, the gridlock. All right. On a practical level, I think it's not possible to just say, let's start fresh with a clean slate. I don't think that's ever going to happen. Right.
I don't either, but
yeah. But I think what needs to be done is to think about how we transition from where we are, this patchwork, what I call the Gordon's knot. You put lots of strings around, and after a while, no one recognizes what it is, and you feel the temptation to take a big sword and just cut the Gordon's knot, right? So, but I think it's about, and this is coming back to our point around leadership, around leading change and innovations and how we use new technologies or stuff. It's about how we use that to transition what we have. So we have to untangle those patchwork, right? But as we untangle them, it's about what do we put back. So what we put back cannot be another patchwork, and this is coming back to another principle, which is about we now understand, and the people in the health system understand, and we talk endlessly about ecosystem. We understand that, right? But we don't really act when we make decisions about systems thinking. So we understand about the ecosystem, but the actions we do is not about the system. It's about individual elements of the system. It's the workforce. It's the IT. It's the infrastructure. It's the regulation. It's the policy, etc., etc., sort of stuff. And I think that's the challenge around the next cohort of leaders in healthcare, or for that matter, any sector which is now got itself into a very complex situation. Right? The only way to get out of that is to start from where we are and to look at the transition, right? And to think about the synergy and the integration of individual solutions, whether it makes the system better rather than making individual elements better. And I think that I've yet to see that, and I kind of think that's the next step.
It's like this jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? That we're all trying to complete. But there's, as you say, there's so many different components and so many moving pieces. Can I ask you, what do you think the effect of technology will have on the health system? And do you think it will make things better? Hopefully, that's, we're very much around tech for good, tech for impact, and we share that ideology. How do you think technology can come in and assist with some of these things?
I think that there's no question in my mind that the next iteration of the future health systems, ecosystems, technology, smart technologies will be an integral part of it. Right? I think what we haven't figured out to date, and I think that's causing a lot of tension around particularly the people who are pushing for the adoption of technology in the healthcare sector, because they're frustrated by the pace of adoption, right? Is that I think the people working in the healthcare system haven't sort of walked through the implications and the changes that's required to adopt new technologies. Because more often than not, what happens is someone will push it, all right? And the people working in the system will get to a point where they realize resistance is futile. So they will grudgingly adopt this. But because they work in the system, they will influence the processes. And most of the time, you have new technology implemented on old processes. It's like kind of like putting an engine on a horse cart. Right? So I think that the next step is actually thinking about how we get the people, the existing people working in the system, how we get them. I think embrace is kind of like a tribe word, but how do we get them to understand and to own and to want to figure out what they need, they themselves have to change, so that this new fantastic technology, whether it's the genome thing or whether it's the new latest fashion on AI or stuff, then it won't become an engine on the horse cart. Right? Because I think for new technology to play its useful role, it cannot be implemented into existing processes and structures.
I think it was interesting, and I hope we never go through anything like COVID ever again, but we'd actually been working with a few groups prior to COVID about doing telehealth, like doing online consults with people and sending in drones with testing kits and things like that. And it was like, you can't do that, that cannot happen. And then COVID came along, and all of a sudden there were so many online consultations, and we were using drones to take medicine and test kits. So hopefully we learned the lesson without actually having to go through the horror, if you like, that was the whole pandemic. Can I ask you, because often, it's not only the health industry, it's quite a few industries, but there's this feeling of stuckness, like we're just stuck. And as you said before, we can identify the problems and we know what the solutions are, and the science is out there and the research is out there. What do you think we need to get out of the stuckness and into the action? So we've spoke about the leadership traits, which are absolutely required. But what else do you think we need to get out of the stuckness that is holding us back?
I think the reason why we kind of feel that it's like ready, aim, ready, aim, but we don't actually fire, so hence getting stuck and stuff. I think that the issue here is about the people who have to make the decision to unlock the gate, to, if you like, let the water flow, so stuff. They don't know how to do that, right? Because they've never done it, right? So the people who are, we call it politicians, we call it private sector entrepreneurs or stuff, whoever's actually are making decisions on the people who are leading the change and are seeing this stuckness, right? I think the fundamental issue they have to ask is, do we need to change the team here? These are not bad people. They've done good for us, right? But what we need from them is just not them, right? So I think it's, and hence I think it's one of those courageous decisions that need to be made by the most senior people who wants to push the agenda through. It's about saying, we now need a different team. Because if you don't have the team, it doesn't matter if you have more money, or if you have more partners, or you have better technology, or you have better institutions. The barriers will still remain.
So many things that we need to work through. So let's go to Athens, 2025. So based on the discussion that we've had and that you're keynoting at the event, what can we expect?
Yeah, so one of the attraction when the whole concept of the Athens events was broached to me was, it was an opportunity not to just be another, symposium, conference, seminar, whatever term we want to call it, so stuff, where we get, eminent people, scholars, whatever, entrepreneurs to come and talk about, what their passions are and, how they've done this sort of stuff. I think to me the attraction was to have an event where the people who are prepared to participate, whether they are speakers or people who are coming to the event, are actually going to come together to explore the way forward in solving the stuckness you talked about, regardless of the sector, is for the participants, like the speakers that I will be part of, is how do we actually come to that event to work alongside the people who will come to the event and wanting them to bring their everyday problem that they are working on, particularly the ones where they're getting stuck, is how do we work with them over those days and, so that we start the learning process that begins at the Athens event, right? And so it can be the beginning of a different way of them learning how to actually attack the problem.
Yeah, and we've very much deliberately asked people to bring an issue from their organisation, and at the same time ask the speakers, such as yourself, to be part of that. Let's work on this every day, to come up with a strategy. So we've had a series of conversations, and we've had a chat, several chats, in fact. What do you find unique about the program that we want to run in Athens?
I'm really excited about the program because the uniqueness is that it's not going to be a traditional program where you're live streaming the panel discussion, the conversations or stuff. This is about getting people to be there. It's about to be able to experience, the emotional side of the discussion, really feeling the learning. And I use the word feeling deliberately because it's a feeling that you will only get if you're present. Right? And I think people like me and my colleagues will be really focused on the people in the room. So this is unique in the sense that it's about working with people in the room, translating and helping them to solve, the things that they are passionate about, which are stuck. In those workshops, in the morning, afternoon, evening session, it's not a talking head session. It's a dialogue. It's a conversation of everybody who's in the team, whether they're participants or whether they're speakers, because the solutions that we will create will come out from those discussions.
Chai, I can't wait to actually be with you in Athens and watch you work your magic, because I've read some of your work and followed some of the things that you're working on, and I do find it, there's magic dust there in getting things done. Thank you for this conversation. And now we're going to throw to some Q&A.